Good day, all. This talk will examine the feminist approach to superheroes. As with all media products, feminism focuses on the issue of sexism among superheroes. This has existed since superheroes were invented. Since most early superheroes were war heroes and men ran the military, there were at first very few superheroines. The earliest male superhero archetypes, as I've said in other talks, were the strong man and the wise man. Their female counterparts appeared later and were presented in more negative terms. The strong woman was the Amazon, and the wise woman was the witch. Unlike strong men, Amazons were not based on real persons, but were fictional. Despite their military training, they were still weaker than men. They supposedly made themselves more man-like by having one breast amputated so that it would not impede their archery. This is clearly a fantasy of male invention. A mastectomy severs the muscles and nerves on one side of the body and so would actually make an archer weaker. Amazons were also tainted with the implication of lesbianism, which was viewed in negative terms at the time. The witch is a much more negative stereotype than the Amazon. The original wise woman was the tribal medicine woman, the only one who had the knowledge of how to make herbal medicines. She was both a doctor and a spiritual leader for the tribe. But when male physicians arose in agricultural societies like ancient Greece, they wanted to get rid of their female competition, so they called them witches and called their potions witchcraft. While there were early stories of good or white witches, most witches were portrayed as evil old crones who stole babies and sacrificed them to the devil in exchange for the power of black magic, supervillains rather than superheroes. This sexist portrayal culminated in the Spanish Inquisition of the 16th to 18th centuries, during which perhaps over 1 million women were tortured and executed as witches. Belief in witchcraft has declined as science has arisen. But sexism persists in the modern media. Feminists argue that media portrayals of women are sexist in two main ways. By portraying women as subordinate or secondary to men, and by portraying women as sex symbols or eye candy for men. Both of these criticisms can certainly be applied to superheroines. In the US, in particular, the majority of the audience for superhero comics is male, and the overwhelming majority of superhero writers, artists, and editors are male. This means that most superheroes and superheroines are created by and for men. Inevitably, this means that they're created from a male viewpoint, and so most superheroines are subordinate and sexy. Superheroines are secondary or subordinate to male superheroes in several ways. Firstly, many superheroines are just female versions of male superheroes. The male character is introduced first, and if he is successful, a female version follows in due course. However popular the superheroine may become, she is still considered a spin-off or knockoff of the male original, and so is always secondary. Such superheroines include Supergirl, Superwoman, Batgirl, Batwoman, Aquagirl, Arrowette, Elastigirl, Hawkgirl, Hawkwoman, Spider-Girl, Spider-Woman, Spider-Gwen, She-Hulk, Red She-Hulk, She-Ra, She-Thing, She-Venom, Thor-Girl, Lady Blackhawk, Lady Deadpool, and several female versions of Tarzan, most notably Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. As for female supergroups, the X-Women were a short-lived spin-off of the X-Men, and Birds of Prey are set in Gotham City as a spin-off of Batman. Secondly, there are those superheroines who've been introduced as replacements for male superheroes who have died or retired. These include Captain Marvel, Dr. Midnight, Hawkeye, Manhunter, Robin, and Thor. While the female versions have attained some popularity, the names are always primarily associated with the male originals. Thirdly, there are those superheroines who've been introduced as love interests for superheroes. The most famous of these is Catwoman, who is Batman's only long-term love interest. As a cat burglar, she is in practice a bad girl version of Batman. Similarly, Black Cat is also a cat burglar who's provided an on-again, off-again love interest for Spider-Man. Elektra, the assassin, was introduced as a bad girl love interest for Daredevil. Belladonna, also an assassin, was introduced as a love interest for the X-Man Gambit. However, while superheroes may flirt with bad girls, they marry good girls. Mera, the Queen of Atlantis, was an appropriate superhero match, and so married Aquaman in 1964 in the first superhero wedding shown in comics. Similarly, Clea is a sorceress who eventually marries the sorcerer, Doctor Strange. Sometimes couples are introduced together, as with Mr. and Mrs. Incredible, Hawkman and Hawkwoman, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Girl or Invisible Woman. Except for the last couple mentioned, who gained their superpowers together, all of these couples have the same superpowers to emphasize that they belong together. Fourth and finally, there are those superheroines who've been introduced or incorporated as members of a supergroup. In such cases, these women always make up a minority of the group, and the group leader is always male. They include the Invisible Girl or Woman in the Fantastic Four, Wonder Woman in the Justice League, Dumb Bunny in the parody group The Inferior Five, the Black Widow and the Scarlet Witch in the Avengers, Aurora and Snowbird in the Canadian group Alpha Flight, Gamora, Nebula, and Mantis in the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Storm, Rogue, and Jean Grey, or Marvel Girl, or Phoenix in the X-Men. All of these supergroups are led by men, with the partial exception of the X-Men. Their original team leader was the male superhero Cyclops, but that role has more recently been taken over by Storm. However, in practice, both Cyclops and Storm always defer to Professor X, Charles Xavier, who remains the X-Men's real leader. Overall, women remain a minority of superheroes. As of 2019, only about 25% of Marvel and DC's characters were women, and female superheroes starred in only 15% of superhero movies and only 10% of superhero comics and TV shows. In all four of these ways, then, superheroines have been made secondary or subordinate to male superheroes. We move on now to examine the portrayal of superheroines as sex symbols. There can be no doubt that this has taken place. Superheroines are sexy. As a rule, they invariably have beautiful faces, perfect bodies, enormous breasts, and skimpy outfits. While male superheroes cover their bodies, even to the extent of wearing full-body armor like Iron Man, superheroines must show some skin, even though this is highly impractical when going into combat, as they frequently do. However, in adopting this appearance, superheroines are just fitting in to current cultural expectations for women in the media. In order to gain a prominent media position, particularly in the US media, virtually all women, especially actresses, are expected to look beautiful and sexy. Superheroines do at least have a legitimate reason for this. Both superheroes and superheroines are, by their nature, supposed to be in excellent physical condition, to have great bodies, and by extension to be good-looking. They are idealized people who are super or superior to normal people in every way, including their looks. Superhero writers and artists are well aware of these cultural expectations, and indeed they generally share them. The standard male attitude to creating superheroines was summed up perfectly by writer Robert Kanigher and artist Carmen Infantino when they created the character of Black Canary in 1947. Infantino has said, quote, "When Kanigher gave me the script, I said, 'How do you want me to draw her?' He said, 'What's your fantasy of a good-looking girl? That's what I want.' Isn't that a great line? So that's what I did. I made her strong in character and sexy in form." This strong, sexy character was a beautiful blonde whose costume included fishnet stockings and a black leather jacket. In short, she was created as the artist's sex fantasy. The same can probably be said of most superheroines, including the most famous of them all, Wonder Woman. From her debut in 1941 to the present day, by far the most popular superheroine is, and always has been, Wonder Woman. So I shall take some time now to examine her. Wonder Woman is most definitely a sex symbol, a beautiful woman in a short skirt. Some feminists have objected to this. However, most feminists have embraced Wonder Woman as a symbol of women's strength and wisdom. She embodies the archetypes of both strong woman and wise woman. She was invented as an amalgam of ancient Greek gods, goddesses, and superheroes, and was originally described as being, quote, "as beautiful as Aphrodite, as wise as Athena, as strong as Hercules, and as swift as Mercury." Note the explicit reference to Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom. As an Amazon princess, Wonder Woman not only has super strength and other physical superpowers, she also embodies the wisdom of the Amazons. She is a representative of a woman's society, and she presents woman's viewpoint in a man's world. Although she is a warrior, she fights for peace. As a woman, she tries to use compassion to resolve conflict. She is the true women's Superman, much more than Supergirl, who's just Superman's cousin. The Amazons were the original women's superheroes, and Wonder Woman is the ultimate Amazon. Wonder Woman's origin story has changed recently, both in comics and in the movies. Originally, Hippolyta, Queen of the Amazons, really wanted a baby, but she couldn't have one, what with there being no men on Themyscira or Paradise Island, where the Amazons live. So, she made Diana out of clay, prayed to Zeus, and he brought Diana to life and gifted her with superpowers. The more modern and more adult version is that Hippolyta and Zeus were having an affair, and Hippolyta got pregnant. They then made up the story about Diana being made out of clay because they knew that if Zeus' wife, Hera, found out about the affair, she would most likely kill Diana and Hippolyta. This is actually more consistent with ancient Greek myths, in which Zeus frequently cheats on Hera with human women, as well as goddesses, nymphs, and any other females he can get hold of. And Hera does indeed get angry and vengeful about them. Wonder Woman's powers also now receive the more traditional explanation that she is a demigoddess, the daughter of a god. She's also half-sister to Hercules, who was the result of another of Zeus's affairs. However, she has powers that Hercules does not have, because she's not just the child of a god and an ordinary woman, as Hercules was. She is the child of that god and an Amazon queen. As a queen, Hippolyta is herself a demigoddess, daughter of Ares, god of war. This means that Wonder Woman is more divine than human, and symbolizes both divine wisdom and divine compassion. In the real world, Wonder Woman was the brainchild of a remarkable man, William Moulton Marston. He was a Harvard grad with multiple qualifications, including a law degree and a PhD in psychology. He was an academic who was well versed in the classics, and so he drew on his knowledge of ancient Greece to give Wonder Woman an authentic background story. He began the process of updating Greek myths and legends, which to this day has provided Wonder Woman with a wealth of storylines which have helped to maintain her popularity. He effectively allowed NAP or DC to reboot all the gods and heroes of ancient Greece and turn them into modern superheroes. As an academic, Marston also conducted the initial studies which led to the invention of the lie detector. This is why Wonder Woman has a magic lasso that compels people to tell the truth, in effect, a portable lie detector. Marston became a pop psychologist, and in 1939 he wrote an article on comics saying that they had their positive features, but that their portrayal of women was generally very negative, mostly showing them as stupid and jealous and petty. In a 1943 article, he wrote that he created Wonder Woman because, quote, "Not even girls want to be girls, so long as our feminine archetype lacks force, strength, and power. The obvious remedy is to create a feminine character with all the strength of Superman, plus all the allure of a good and beautiful woman." Marston's goal in creating Wonder Woman was explicitly feminist. He claimed Wonder Woman was, quote, psychological propaganda for a new type of woman that he believed, quote, should rule the world. So Marston created Wonder Woman with the explicit purpose of introducing a positive female role model into comics. And I would argue that Wonder Woman remains such to this day. However, Marston's ideas about just what a positive female role model should be were, to say the least, unusual. In addition to ancient Greek myths, Marston also partly based the character of Wonder Woman on feminist Margaret Sanger, who fought to legalize birth control for women in the US in the early 20th century and who founded Planned Parenthood. She provided him with a role model for the modern strong woman who challenges male authority to fight for women's rights. But she was not his only modern female role model. Marston lived with two women at the same time. One his wife, the other his student, each of whom bore him 2 children, and both of whom contributed to the creation of Wonder Woman. Indeed, Marston only turned to writing Wonder Woman after his academic career came to an abrupt halt when Harvard found out about his ménage à trois and promptly fired him. Their story has been told in the 2017 movie Professor Marston and the Wonder Women. As if having 2 wives was not unconventional enough, Marston was also apparently a big believer in sexual bondage. He believed that the way for women and men to liberate themselves was for women to become what he called love leaders and teach men the pleasures of sexual submissiveness and being tied up. This is the other reason Wonder Woman has a lasso, so she can tie people up. All the early Wonder Woman stories written by Marston frequently have people being tied up, usually beautiful women. The Amazons on Paradise Island tie each other up regularly as a training exercise to teach self-restraint. It has been calculated that more than a quarter of the panels in Marston's Wonder Woman comics showed people tied up. So, Wonder Woman basically began as William Marston's bondage fantasy. This is one reason why she has such a skimpy outfit, which for the 1940s was very risque. Marston has written that he deliberately made Wonder Woman sexy so as to attract young people to his program of sexual liberation, and she still is. Wonder Woman is a princess who's been portrayed by beauty queens. In the TV series, Linda Carter is a former Miss World USA, and in the movies, Gal Gadot is a former Miss Israel. Moreover, Wonder Woman was never intended to appeal just to men. Frederick Wertham accused Wonder Woman of promoting acceptance of lesbianism, and he was right. Wonder Woman herself is straight and has a boyfriend, Captain Steve Trevor, who's been called the male Lois Lane. But she comes from a society where there are no men, so sex can only be lesbian. Marston's 2 wives stayed together in a lesbian relationship after his early death, and for him, promoting an acceptance of lesbianism was part of his project of sexual liberation. Wonder Woman has indeed become a sex symbol in the lesbian community as well as for straight men. Now, the concept of a sex symbol is seen by some as being by definition, degrading to women. But Marston did not see it that way. On the contrary, he saw sexual liberation as an essential component of and route to overall human liberation. A 1943 cartoon by artist Harry Peter showed Wonder Woman breaking 3 chains labeled prejudice, man's superiority, and prudery. Prudery is just a way of making women ashamed of their own bodies, and so should be cast aside by liberated women. Wonder Woman refuses to be ashamed of her own body. Marston's theory of sexual liberation was an idea that was ahead of its time in the 40s, but became very popular in the 60s, before fading again in the 80s. Although Marston's story is unique, I would argue that it can still help us to understand why some people love comics while others hate them. Marston's Wonder Woman was both the lowest form of literature and the highest. On the one hand, her comics were basically Marston's personal softcore porn collection. But on the other hand, he literally intended for them to make the world a better place. At the time, it was believed that comics were very influential on young people, and Marston believed that Wonder Woman's message of peace, love, and bondage could make men less aggressive, less likely to go to war, more loving and caring. Unfortunately, comics just are not as influential as Marston thought they were. Wonder Woman was invented during World War II, and Marston saw the Nazis as the ultimate example of the evils of a society run by men. So, Wonder Woman went to war and fought against them. Like Captain America, she displayed her US patriotism by having a costume basically made out of the Stars and Stripes. More recently, this has been replaced by a more Amazon-looking costume. Still, despite her Greek origins, Wonder Woman was originally a symbol of American patriotism and American military might, just like Captain America and Superman. Marston died of cancer in 1947. And after that, Wonder Woman lost the bondage aspect, but also lost most of her independence and leadership role. When World War II ended in 1945, America's slogan became "Jobs for the boys." So the returning male soldiers took jobs away from women who were told to go back to their kitchens. And so Wonder Woman's new writers emphasized her secret identity as Diana Prince, making her deferential to male authority and wrapped up in her love affair with Steve Trevor. She became concerned with clothes and looking good, like a traditional housewife. She even temporarily gave up her superpowers and ran a clothing boutique as a cover for her work as a government agent. But this approach saw sales decline and fans protest about how Wonder Woman had become a romance magazine. In July 1972, feminists Gloria Steinem and Dorothy Pitman Hughes founded the feminist Ms. magazine, which is still being published and recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. For the cover of issue number 1, they selected a picture of a flying Wonder Woman with the caption, "Wonder Woman for President." Of all the images they could have chosen for their inaugural issue, they decided that Wonder Woman was the US's ultimate symbol of the empowered woman. The magazine includes an essay by Steinem on Wonder Woman's role in inspiring feminism and describes her as a feminist icon. Steinem joined the chorus of voices demanding that Wonder Woman regain her superpowers, which she soon did. The TV series with Linda Carter, which began in 1975, set its first season in World War II and showed a strong Wonder Woman fighting Nazis, but a sweet, demure Diana Prince playing a glorified secretary deferential to male authority. But the next two seasons were set in the 1970s and made Diana Prince a government agent in her own right, more self-confident, showing the progress that women had made from the 1940s to the 1970s. In the comics, Wonder Woman regained her powers and continued to work as a government agent, but that storyline came to an end in 1986, when she finally married Steve Trevor and the comic briefly ceased publication. In 1987, she was rebooted. Not married, indeed without Steve Trevor altogether, more independent, sexier, but also tougher. As women became stronger and more independent in the late 20th century, so did Wonder Woman. In the recent movies, she is a warrior who fights beside Superman and is his equal. In recent comics, there's also been a romance between Wonder Woman and Superman. And where Lois Lane is a good partner for Clark Kent, Wonder Woman is a much better partner for Superman. Only Wonder Woman can be an equal partner for Superman, and indeed, only Wonder Woman can be a marital partner for Superman. In 1969, well-known science fiction author Larry Niven wrote an essay entitled Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex, in which he pointed out that if Superman had sex with an ordinary woman, he'd kill her. When he came, his super sperm would rip right through her body and blow her head off. DC has never acknowledged this problem, and in some storylines, Superman and Lois Lane marry and have children. The problem was finally acknowledged in the 2008 movie Hancock, where Will Smith has Superman's powers, but is still trailer trash. A teenage superhero groupie literally throws herself at him, and he just manages to get her off him before he blows a hole in the roof of his trailer, which of course terrifies her, so she runs away. Wonder Woman is a demigoddess, so she could handle super sex. Indeed, Wonder Woman is the only female character in the DC universe that could survive sex with Superman, apart from Supergirl, who is his cousin and so off limits. This symbolizes the equality of Wonder Woman and Superman. As I said, Wonder Woman is the true women's Superman, the ultimate superheroine. The first Wonder Woman movie, released in 2017, brought some muted protests from feminists about the skimpiness of her costume and the emphasis on her beauty and sexiness, but still generated an overwhelmingly positive response from most feminists. As Jill Gutovitz said, quote, "Her outright rejection of male authority is liberating to watch." As someone raised on the all-female Paradise Island, she's never before encountered the idea that women should defer to men and has no interest in adopting it. She does what she knows needs to be done, despite the opposition of her romantic interest, Captain Steve Rogers, and the male military establishment. Gutovitz describes watching her first battle as, quote, near orgasmic. Watching a woman save the world, as opposed to the traditional parade of male heroes and superheroes, is empowering to every woman. Julie Zalinger called it, quote, a historical experience. Angela Watercutter called it, quote, revolutionary, and said that, quote, when you don't expect to see yourself as a hero, you don't easily forget what it looks like. Finally, Emma Gray called it, quote, uplifting, and said that, quote, for many women viewers, Wonder Woman filled a hole they didn't know they had. I reacted emotionally because I immediately knew how potentially life-changing it would have been to see such depictions of blatant, unapologetic female strength as a kid. For most feminists today, Wonder Woman symbolizes the independent woman, the woman who does not need a man to validate her, the standalone superheroine. While she occasionally works with the Justice League Boys Club, she mostly goes her own way. She has come from a society of women that's working very nicely, and she is its ambassador to man's world. Basically, she's come to try to knock some sense into men, a task which has proven to be very difficult. As this self-conscious voice for women, I would argue that she is and must be a feminist symbol, and that she has become even more so in recent years. As for being a sex symbol, part of being a woman is being sexy, and so part of women's rights is having the right to be so. Prudery is just another part of male domination, designed to make women ashamed of their own bodies, and so to undermine their feeling of self-worth. Wonder Woman rejects it, and so do most feminists. If men have a problem with how women dress, then that's men's problem, not women's. Wonder Woman has just as much right to show off her super beauty as her super strength. If you've got it, flaunt it. And even though she's now over 80 years old, Wonder Woman has still got it. Wonder Woman quickly became one of DC's big three, together with Superman and Batman, and still is. Marvel created popular female characters who are part of a team, such as the Invisible Girl or Woman in the Fantastic Four and Storm in the X-Men, but they did not have a standalone superheroine to rival Wonder Woman until the invention of Ms. Marvel, also known as Captain Marvel. Ms. Marvel debuted in 1977, and the use of the term Ms. in her codename may have been deliberately intended to establish a connection with Wonder Woman's famous Ms. magazine cover, released less than 5 years previously. More broadly, it showed that she was explicitly intended to symbolize the modern, independent woman. Her secret identity, Carol Danvers, was an officer and pilot in the US Air Force. Clearly a strong, capable woman even before she gained her superpowers, able to make a career in the most male section of society, the military. She had no long-term male love interest and was instead directly involved in women's struggle for equal pay for equal work, which was probably the foremost concern of the women's movement at the time. From her debut, Marvel billed Ms. Marvel as, quote, Earth's mightiest hero. This was specifically intended to mean that her superpowers made her mightier or stronger than any of Marvel's male heroes, including strong men like the Thing and the Hulk. She is essentially Marvel's version of Superman or Supergirl. Like them, she has powers which include super strength, near invulnerability, and flight, including the ability to fly unprotected in outer space. Where they gain their superpowers by absorbing sunlight, she can absorb all forms of energy. And where they can release this energy through their heat vision, she can fire photonic blasts from her hands and generate and control any form of radiation or gravity. These energy blasts, which channel the power of a white hole, make her mightier than any of the other Avengers, whom she periodically joins. Moreover, she is fully aware of the extent of her powers. One of the traits that she shares with Wonder Woman is her unwavering self-confidence that she can overcome any opposition and accomplish anything she sets her mind to, because she truly believes that she is the mightiest hero of them all. Carol Danvers fits the traditional superheroine mold. A beautiful blue-eyed blonde with a hot bod, which is outlined in her skin-tight costume, as portrayed by Brie Larson in the movies. However, after she changed her code name to Captain Marvel in 2012, the name of Ms. Marvel was taken up in 2013 by a new superheroine, Kamala Khan. She has completely different superpowers, centering on the ability to shapeshift and to stretch and expand her body like Mr. Fantastic or Plastic Man. More importantly, she's a different kind of person, from a different social background. She is in her early teens, and while she is pretty, she's skinny and lacks the female curves of most superheroines. Moreover, she is a Muslim, and so is conservative about her appearance. When she first gains her superpowers, she tries a costume modelled on that of Carol Danvers, but feels uncomfortable and quickly abandons it in favour of one that is much less revealing. In short, she is the first superheroine whose appearance is deliberately not sexy. Her popularity shows that it is possible to create superheroines who don't have big boobs and short skirts. It also shows that the US is ready to accept a non-white superheroine. Similarly, moving beyond individual superheroines, Marvel's recent Black Panther movies have broken stereotypes of both race and gender. Black Panther is the resident superhero of the fictional African nation of Wakanda. Because it is the world's only repository of the fictional supermetal vibranium, Wakanda is the only African nation that is more technologically advanced than the West. Vibranium allows blacks to be more powerful than whites. In addition, the Black Panther is a prince, and so has a bodyguard. This is unusual, in that superheroes normally protect others instead of having someone to protect them. But even more unusual is that these bodyguards are an all-female phalanx of warrior women, essentially Black Amazons. These female bodyguards frequently demonstrate their superior fighting prowess and provide a modern example of a group of strong women. As with the feminist movement in real life, the earliest leading superheroines were white, middle-class women like Diana Prince and Carol Danvers, but the lead in recent years has been increasingly taken by women of colour. In conclusion, then, I would argue that while there has been, and still to some extent is, sexism among superheroes, this is diminishing as it diminishes in society as a whole. I would argue that while superheroines have definitely been sex symbols, this has not prevented them from also symbolizing female strength and wisdom through the archetypes of the strong woman and the wise woman. I would argue that superheroines symbolize the best of woman, just as superheroes symbolize the best of man. I would argue that superheroines have been positive role models for women. They've provided images of women transcending the bonds that hold them down, whether those are the bonds of gravity or the bonds of male domination. I believe that superheroines have made a significant contribution to feminism, and I believe that most feminists would agree with me. That concludes what I have to say on the feminist approach to superheroes. A transcript of this talk is attached if you're interested. Good day all.